Another video. Steve, another video? When are you gonna give it a rest? We've had enough. All right, we know you got a bunch of records. All right, who cares? Do something else. No, I'm not. But anyways, you still watching? Today I'm gonna go through, my original plan was I was going to list my favorite live records that I owned or something like that. And I really didn't think I had that many. I'm not a big fan of live records. I have a handful. And, I don't listen to them all that much, but I was gonna do just like, highlight the ones I like the most or just show you what I had. And then as I was going through all my collection, thinking maybe I got like 10 or 15, all of a sudden I'm like, holy crap, like I have like maybe 40 something, not including like, I used to collect Van Halen. I have tons of bootleg records and stuff like that. I'm not including those, just like officially released live records. I had like 40 something. So I was like, well, that's too many to do in one video. So what I decided to do is I'm just going to do like 4 of these videos and just go through them all, do like 10 per episode. So I can just show you, these are the live records I have. Like I said, I don't really listen to these all that much. A couple of them aren't too bad. And actually one of them coming up in a later episode is a record I really love. My favorite album by that band. It's a live record that they put out, but that's coming up later, not today. So I'm just going to kind of go through these and show you what live records I have. And feel free to chime in and let me know what you think of these, or tell me about some other live records that you love. So let's begin. From 1991, we get Agent Orange and Real Live Sound. Now, you're looking at this cover and you're saying, that doesn't say Real Live Sound. That says Sonic Snake Session. And you are right. You do not need glasses, unless you already have them. But Agent Orange 91 put out this live record called Real Live Sound. It is available on CD, but I picked up this 2 CD set. The first CD has their album, This Is Your Voice, and this is the voice, and then the EP, When You Least Expect It, is on the first CD, and then the second CD is Real Live Sound. At the time when I got this, that was the easiest way to pick this up, so that's what I ended up doing. And it's really good. This live record was recorded at the Roxy in Hollywood. Brent Lyles and Derek O'Brien of Social D were in the band at this point with Mike Palm. I think it's the only thing recorded that those guys are playing on during their time at Agent Orange. But it's a really good live record. There's a handful of tracks on this, on Real Live Sound, that I think are a little bit better than the studio versions. Certainly some of the stuff from This Is the Voice, the production on This Is the Voice is okay. It's not the greatest, but so these live recordings sound a lot better. There's some liner notes inside. I've been looking at possibly, I'm a big Agent Orange fan. I have, pretty much all the stuff that they've put out, and I've been thinking about picking up the Real Live Sound CD, the standalone version. If I found it really cheap, I think I might grab it, but it seems kind of stupid to just pick that up because I already have it. It's on here, but as one of those kind of completist things, my favorite bands, I'll sometimes do things like that. I wouldn't do that with everybody, but just some of my favorite bands, just kind of want that in your collection, all of them. But yeah, good live record. This one I do like, and I have listened to quite a bit. Real Live Sound by Agent Orange. 1978, we get Briefcase Full of Blues by who else? The Blues Brothers, John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd. At first, I wasn't really even thinking of including this because I don't know that a lot of people think of it as a live album. They just think of it as the first Blues Brothers album, but it is a live album. It was recorded at the Universal Amphitheater when the Blues Brothers opened for Steve Martin. Steve Martin was doing a comedy concert. I think he did a few days at the Universal Amphitheater back in, I think, 78. This was recorded, and the Blues Brothers had sort of graduated from being a bit on Saturday Night Live. Originally, they used to warm up the show before they started rolling. Then they started doing them on the show, and then they were opening for Steve Martin, the biggest comedian and one of the biggest acts, regardless, at the time. And then they recorded those shows and put it out as Briefcase Full of Blues. This album was extremely popular, went to #1, sold a lot of copies. And then, of course, they went on to make a few more records, and certainly they made a pretty successful film. And the Blues Brothers still sort of survive to this day in different versions. Aykroyd's always there. But this is a really fun record. There's a lot of, energy, and they were certainly, even more so, they did so even more so in the film, but this began them kind of, it's always funny thinking that like a lot of these like R&B acts like Aretha Franklin and James Brown weren't really that popular, and these guys kind of reinvigorated their careers. As bizarre as that may sound, you think, how is Aretha Franklin and James Brown like falling by the wayside, so to say? But it was happening, and as weird as it may sound, these guys kind of, introduced them to a whole new audience, and suddenly those guys were able to perform and record again and draw big crowds thanks to the Blues Brothers. But yeah, fun record, just a really good live performance by these guys. 1963, we get James Brown live at the Apollo. Speaking of James Brown, this was his first live record. I picked this up not too long ago. It's just one of those ones that just occurred to me one day, like, I feel like I should own that. It's a very popular record. People always kind of point to it as one of those, essential live records, I guess. And this is, I guess, a later version of this. It's got all these nice liner notes in here, pictures, and just going over everything about this kind of historic show. He's put out a bunch of other live records since, but this is a really good listen. I just listened to this the other day because I hadn't heard it in a little while, and it's a really good show, very entertaining. You certainly get a sense of, even just without visually seeing it, you just get a sense of what a electric performer he was on stage. But really good. I like this one a lot. I started off saying I don't listen to these all that much, and I don't listen to them all that much, but when I do pop them in, like I did this the other night, I am reminded how much I do enjoy these, actually. 1979, we get Cheap Trick live at Budokan. This is sort of the album that kind of made them really popular. I think before that, they'd been around, but they weren't that popular. They really hadn't kind of broke through. They certainly probably had a decent following, but small. And then when this comes out, it's really popular and just kind of puts them on another level, It's funny, like in the 70s, because you think of Peter Frampton, his famous live record, and then this record, I don't know you see that too much anymore. I mean, I guess there were a few of those MTV Unplugged records that came out in like the 90s that sort of had that same kind of impact. But like the 70s, like live records seemed to be one of those things that was like almost expected for certainly rock bands to put out. And you had ones like this that took on like this other level of popularity, that wasn't even matched by their studio work. But I remember this, my brother had this probably on vinyl back in the late 70s or early 80s, and I remember him playing this a lot and hearing it, and it's really good. I like it. I haven't listened to this in ages. I bought this a long time ago. This is probably in like the first batch of CDs I got when I got a CD player. For whatever reason, I remember picking this up. It's not like they were cheap back then, but I've never been a big Cheap Trick fan, but for some reason I just decided to grab this one. And the tracks on here that everybody kind of remembers: Surrender, I Want You to Want Me. If those songs are ever played on like rock radio now, these are the ones they play. They don't play the studio ones, they play the live ones, which, you know, says something about, you know, the impact of this record. But yeah, it's a pretty good one. Cheap Trick at Budokan. 1970, we get The Doors and Absolutely Live. This is the CD reissue. The original album had a different cover that apparently Jim Morrison was not too happy about, but the record label chose it and they put it on there. Sorry, a DVD that I have burned is falling out. But the record label, you know, chose the cover work and they had no say in it, I guess. And that was that. But when the CD reissue came out, they put a new cover on it. I don't know why. I can't imagine it was because Jim Morrison didn't like the original cover, because he was long dead at that point. Or was he? But yeah, it's a good record. I was into the Doors in the early 80s or mid 80s and had a lot of their records. And I remember picking this up in the 90s sometime. I was really getting into the Doors in the 90s and picked this up, and maybe from one of those record clubs, and would listen to it quite a bit. It's funny, this one is unlike the other ones necessarily, kind of, I think, are all like one show more or less, or maybe, you know, different nights of the same kind of run of shows at those venues, whereas this is from different stops along the way on this tour, from various cities, etc., etc. But it's funny, when I was like looking at this the other day, it's, you know, the Doors are, you know, almost like constantly doing this. But if you look at the booklet here, it's like the cover, it's Jim Morrison. Inside, Jim Morrison, Jim Morrison, Jim Morrison, Jim Morrison, Jim Morrison. The only pictures of CD, Jim Morrison. The only pictures of the other three guys is on the back, you know, smaller, you know. It's just, I mean, I get it. Jim Morrison was, you know, the main draw, and, you know, what maybe was selling, helping sell records, having his picture splashed all over the place, because he became this kind of iconic figure later, you know, in like the late 70s, early 80s, you know. But it's just always still so bizarre to me, because, you know, he wasn't a solo act. You know, these three guys contributed quite a bit to make this band successful, but it's just always like a little funny how they kind of like relegate these guys to, like, you know, a tiny picture in the back or something like that. But yeah, good record. 1994, we get the Dead Milkmen from Philadelphia, punk band, fun band, seen them live a few times, always a good show. Picked this up at Waterloo in Austin. Big fan of these guys. Don't know that I felt like I really needed a live record by them, but I picked it up, you know, and it's all right, you know. I wouldn't say it's like a great. I think if I wanted to listen to these songs, I don't know that I would pick up this. You know, some live records, sometimes you can kind of treat them almost as like a sort of greatest hits album, obviously, and that, you know, certainly applies to this album as well, although this is certainly a case where I'd much prefer the studio versions as opposed to these live versions, but not something that I really reach for all that much. But, you know, glad I have it. 1976, we get Jimmy Cliff and his album In Concert, subtitled The Best of Jimmy Cliff. Like I was mentioning in the Dead Milkmen, you know, live records a lot of times essentially is kind of like a quasi best of or greatest hits record. I don't know. I would imagine maybe that's the way labels kind of treat them or look at them that, you know, that way. But yeah, love Jimmy Cliff. Seen him live a bunch of times. Not a whole lot here in the liner notes. But this is a good concert to listen to. Like if you did just want like something with a little bit of like a, you know, a handful of his more well-known records, this certainly couldn't go wrong with this one. But yeah, fun concert, really good. And speaking of Jimmy Cliff, from 2013, we get the KCRW sessions. This is a performance in a radio studio. So no audience screaming and hollering or anything like that. It's just Jimmy and his guitar, maybe one or two other guys kind of helping out. You know, very low key, very, you know, personal. You know, it's similar to like all those unplugged records that were coming out in the 90s that I mentioned before. And pretty good, you know, he's still got, his voice is still really good. He's still playing very well. A good listen, you know. I mean, I'm not a, you know, I don't think I have any of those unplugged records, but those had audiences. This has like nobody. I mean, you know, you don't even hear the radio hosts talking, but, so, you know, it's a little odd. I don't know if I was going to include it at first, but it is a live record, you know, it is a live performance. And speaking of seeing him, saw him at Webster Hall in 2013. That might be the last time that I saw him live. And I mean, it was insane because I don't know how old he was at that time. Yet probably in his 70s. And he's up on that stage running around and everything. And I was just like, holy crap, like how does he do that at that age? But it was insane, you know, but just a really good performance. But yeah, this is a good, fun listen, you know. 1999, we get The Clash and their first live record, From Here to Eternity Live. Similar to, I guess, The Doors that I mentioned. This is not a specific show. The Clash had put out some live records of specific shows, but this is not. This is covers, you know, different live shows from maybe the 70s going up to like 82 or whatever. So you're kind of getting that mix. But I listened to this as well the other night, and they do a really good job, like, melding these together. I mean, if you didn't know any better, you'd probably think it was just one live show that you're hearing. But really good record, you know, I enjoy it. It's fun hearing these live versions. I don't know that they vary that much from the studio versions. I mean, they do, but, you know, I mean, I feel like, you know, they kind of are pretty much in line with the studio recordings from my memory, you know. But it's really good. I like this. I picked it up, I believe, at Looney Tunes in Long Island a couple years ago. And I think when I originally picked it up, I thought this was the Shea Stadium concert when they opened for The Who. It's not. It's just live, you know, kind of like a compilation of live performances. They have released that Shea Stadium live one, and I think it's called, you know, The Clash. It's Shea Stadium or something, so I should have known. But I didn't. And finally, everybody's like, are you going to show any vinyl, man? Well, here we go. 1981, we get the Devo live record. This is an EP. Picked this up at Atomic Pop Shop down in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Got this one, really like it. Whip It's on here, Girl You Want, Gates of Steel, Be Stiff. But they have since reissued this a few times, I think, and included the whole concert. One side green, one side red. Merry Christmas, everyone. But yeah, it's a good record. I like it. You know, I like Devo. They're fun. I never saw them live. I wish I had gotten a chance to see them live. I think they just were playing. If they're not right now, they were playing their like kind of final tour or something like that. But yeah, it's a good one. I like it. You know, I started off this video saying I don't really like live records. I don't listen to them at all. And I'm going through every one of these. I'm like, yeah, I like this. Yeah, this is good. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. Anyways, I got 3 more of these episodes to do where I'm going to say the same thing over and over again. So please tune in and let me know what your favorite live records are. Did I show one of them here today? Perhaps. Anyways, thank you for tuning in and putting up with my BS. We'll see you another time later.